I'll start with a quick review for this book, Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. So, there is some interesting information in this book. He raises some questions and some practices that are currently being used about environmental alarmism. Versus the problem is what problems it poses. But I felt like some information is being misused, so it wasn't, or some of the points he makes are a little questionable. Some of the conclusions he arrives at are not fully supported by, or could be contested if he had an opponent. But I think there is some just the fact that there is not a lot of books about the fact that it's not as bad, for example, just getting that another view we don't usually get just by itself is interesting. But again, I think he didn't do the best job representing that view, because I think there is a lot of controversial ideas he brings there, and he didn't fully acknowledge all the holes he has in his theory, at least. Let's see the notes. Reports about a crisis in the 2040s was misinterpreted, since report says if emission would not cut by 50%, there would be higher temperatures. Nothing about a looming crisis. There was a lot of coverage about a looming crisis in the next years, in the 2040s, 2030s. The thing is that no one says anything about a crisis. The report says that there would be higher temperatures, not about a crisis. Similarly, the next one is the reports don't show death as a consequence of climate change. It simply shows higher temperature. There's nothing about deaths or anything like that in the report. Part of the cause of fire is more development in the areas of fire, also lack of controlled fires. The fact that there is more people living next to forests, for example, could cause more devastation as a consequence of fire. There's also a lack of controlled fires, or the fact that they extinguish any fire right away and do not let it burn. So that's like a forest management situation. We should strive to lower emissions, all while maintaining economic development. So that's I think the best argument he had, that climate change or all the measures we take against could hinder economic development. So he argues for a combination of lowering emissions all while maintaining economic development, because it often comes on the count of the other. The Amazon is only responsible for 5% carbon capacity. Pictures published are either not from the Amazon or from different years. So he says it's like only 5% instead of, I think it says 20%. I'm not sure which one is right, but he claims that it's only 5%. And he says that the pictures that were circulated back then were either not from the Amazon or from actually different years. So there is some misrepresentation of the facts. Deforestation happened in all developed countries when they were developing. So that's an argument. He says like it happened always, and it shouldn't alarm us. But that's not the best argument. I think it's an argument. That's not the best argument, because that's the fact that we did it in the past doesn't mean we have to still do it. Next one is straws represent a fraction of all plastics. So he says like the fact that there is a wide ban on straws, it doesn't make any sense, because it's a very small fraction of all plastics. Natural products are not always preferred over artificial ones, as they could require more energy to produce. So natural is not always better. It could actually be the opposite. Poor countries often have more dire threats to handle than plastic waste. They have hunger, and they have other issues to deal with, corruption and things like that. And that's why the plastic issue is not at the top of their minds. Aqua farming is now producing 50% of fish consumption. It's an interesting fact that there's a lot of aqua farming going on in about which produce about 50% of all fish, which he brings as an argument that fishing is not a big of issue as it being proposed. Even if everyone would be vegans, emissions would only be cut by 10%. It's an interesting fact that it's not about the meat consumption is not going to change. It's 10%. It's not negligible, but it's not going to change things altogether. Nuclear power is safer than thought and would be cheaper when used more. So he strongly advocate for nuclear power. He says that it's safer than it's being taught or thought. It's being misrepresented. And he says that it's also going to be cheaper. Right now it's more expensive, I think, than other ways. But it would be cheaper the more we do it, such like solar and wind. Moving to solar and wind power requires storage, which is extremely expensive because it requires batteries and a lot of space. And he says that it's extremely expensive. I think he has an idea that nuclear is cheaper. Companies who are criticized often defer to corroborate with criticizing NGOs. What they do is they just working with them, and that's often in order to deflect some of the criticism. The production of solar panels is environmentally costly. So it's a problem with solar is that the actual solar panels are very environmentally costly. The author raises some conspiracies, in regards to the motives of those who oppose nuclear and natural gas. He's saying that there is a lot of money involved, and the reason they do it is not from pure climate ideas. There is always money involved, as usual. Many of those who oppose nuclear power promoted their own solutions of renewable or natural gas. Usually those who advocated against nuclear power tried to advance their own measures and technology, etc. So again, money is being used here. A nuclear reactor cannot explode like a nuclear bomb. So that's like there is a conception or a misconception about the fact that nuclear reactor can explode just like a nuclear bomb, which is untrue. The author brings some questionable practices by progressives to denounce those who oppose their views. So there is some questionable practices that progressives are deploying in order to counter those who oppose their views, which some of them are just not cool. You bring some ideas there. The author draws parallels between religion to the new religion of environmentalism. There's, like you said, there's many parallels between religion to the new religion of environmentalism. He thinks that it's a religion by all means. Next one is climate dystopia promotes fear and hell-like stories, which he thinks that it's not helpful when we promote that hell-like stories, just like religion sometimes, and it's just not effective. Next one is emissions are not a consequence of malevolence, rather the consequence of living in poverty elimination. There is a thought of that emissions there is malevolence, people want to destroy the world or things like that, but it's not the case. Emissions are just a consequence of poverty elimination and just the fact that we consume energy, and that causes emissions. In the last one, the author strongly encourages the use of nuclear power. That's the main thing you can get out of the book, is that nuclear power should be used more, and it's safer than he thought, and it should be cheaper, and could be the only way, according to him at least, that we can reach a cleaner environment and to actually produce all the energy that is needed for our consumption. So that is for the notes. Again, there is some controversial parts in the book, but I think there is a good overview of the other side of the argument, which we don't hear often. You don't have to agree with everything that's said here, and I didn't, but it's still good to be exposed to other ideas. So it's going to be a 3 out of 5. Thank you.